Welcome to Lessons from Leaders here on Cuppa TV. I'm your host, Yasmin London. We've partnered with Nespresso Professional, who are proud to support the conversations that matter, because sometimes the best ideas happen over a great cup of coffee. Today we're talking everything boomers to zoomers, how businesses can deal with not one, not two, but 5 generations across their workplaces, from their values to their communication style and their expectations. This is a really big one to unpack. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in and enjoy our chat. So I'm going to start with you, Katie. Can you describe what generational intelligence is as a core leadership skill? What does it actually mean? And why is it important right now for businesses?
Yes, we have the most age-diverse workforce in recorded history, which means that it's possible to have 5 generations present in the same workplace within 3 models of work in the one workplace. And so what that means is that we've got 20-year-olds up to 75 plus at times. Usually that's family business. So what that means then is that we've got a whole range of people who've been formed differently. And that means that what they expect of the world, what they expect of work, and vice versa, is fundamentally different. So the challenge for leadership now, and the challenge to unlock performance, is to be able to essentially decode the drivers of human behaviour, not just across your own generation or 1 to 2 generations, but to do it across 5 generations, usually 4, in an accelerated cultural moment that is fundamentally destabilised and always changing. So we're looking to position leaders to see themselves essentially as cultural translators. So they need to not just be able to go optimize, efficiency, wow, but it's actually about what it means to be human and to remain vital as contributors in the workforce, given people are working longer, and do that in a way that is fair and reasonable, that is fair play, and that really seeks to be curious and understand, because I think the velocity of our culture is not slowing down, is it? And so the human brain under stress and under pressure, we default back to the level of our understanding and to our formation. And so we can make assumptions and we interpret rather than understand. And so a lot of the leaders and execs that I work with now, I'm saying to them, you think your job is this, but it's actually this. You've got to become a cultural decoder and a translator across systems, across age groups, across formations.
I really love that you've said what's fair and reasonable, because that's a really important piece of the puzzle. We do get really caught up in optimizing and productivity, and we do need to remember the human element. And I think when we talk about what's fair and reasonable, I'm going to go to you, Sandy, here, because we do have myths, I guess, and stereotypes that we often fall into when we judge different generations. For example, older people really suck at technology, or younger people are lazy. They don't make them like they used to. What are the myths that you're seeing when it comes to the generations in business, Sandy?
And yes, as you just said, the myth is that the Gen Z are lazy and that the baby boomers can't embrace technology, because it is a myth. And in our workplace, we're in a hotel, and we have a huge range from 19 to 65. And everybody's a part of one team. They're all embracing the technology, particularly the baby boomers. And then we've also got the Gen Z. They're not lazy, they're just distracted. There's so much going on that if we can't keep them interested and involved and engaged in every day, then they'll appear lazy, but it's just that they're distracted and they're looking for something to keep them motivated at all times. And with a hotel, every day is different. Maybe some of the roles the same, but every day is different, and you need to keep on engaging with them and engage them and embrace them into the whole family, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, communicating with them is a really important piece of that puzzle. I was listening to a speaker not so long ago share his stories about a younger employee that he had and the concept of voicemail, and that basically she eventually told him that the only person that ever left her a voicemail was him and her granddad. And so, these are those lessons that we've really got to understand, the way that we connect, the way that we communicate. It's a digital first world in many ways. So Katie, when it comes to social and technological influences, how do you think these shape what people expect from their leaders today?
Yeah, so for a Gen Z, they will communicate 75% of the time digitally. So their normative practice, their default is to have a mediated form of communication. So sometimes, when they've got to put on their big boy pants and use their words, it's not that they've got less capacity, it's that they're less practiced at doing that. And because they sit in an algorithm that is completely curated according to, it becomes an echo chamber. And it's not just Gen Z, we all do it. But what that means is that the intergenerational piece is really important because we're designed for mutual interdependence, where we are better and more productive and more generative when we appreciate the differences, and we're pack animals, aren't we? So for a Gen Z who's been raised screen ages and their normative practice is to communicate digitally or in a mediated space and to curate their online persona with incredible care. So, for example, this is a bit cheeky, but, we've created the monster, It's like I've got all these angry Gen X and boomers going, oh, bloody Gen Zs. And I'm like, well, who gave them the phone? Because they were 3, We've created the monster. So again, fair and reasonable, right? So I was talking to an ABC producer and she had a very, very important interview with a member of federal parliament. And she had a Gen Z graduate. And the Gen X was in a production meeting, and so she's a good Gen X. So she had her phone on silent, turned down. In fact, it might have even been in her bag. And the Gen Z knew that her boss was in this important meeting and got the call that they had to change the time for this very, very important interview. So because she's a Gen Z and didn't want to be rude, aggressive is usually the term used, didn't call, but shot her boss a text message. But because we've got a Gen X so the age at which you are exposed to a technology, will determine how integrated that technology becomes in your life. So for the Gen X, this was not normative for her from a formational age. This was a new adaptive, I suppose, hack that she'd involved. And so this Gen Z shot her a text and was like, cool, peace. And the Gen X didn't check her phone because she thought if it was that important, you would either physically come and get me or you would call and everyone would be okay with it. And they nearly lost the interview. And so I had this ABC producer, and as soon as she found out what I did, like it was my vote, and another thing, I tell you what, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Because both generations were behaving completely consistently with their formation, but they both assumed that the other would understand and appreciate and respond. And so it became not about capacity, not about respect. It wasn't about laziness or entitlement. It wasn't about I'm the boss and you're not. It was about the assumptions that we brought into the workplace. And it was about the fact that we default to what we think. It's like, why aren't you the same as me, you weirdo? So it's a bit of that energy that we've got to kind of manage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that homophily, I think, is the term, where birds of a feather flock together. We all like what is consistent for us.
Exactly. And that's the myth of communication, is that it's happened at all, right? And so I think that a lot of the organisations that I work with, and they'll be like, we've got a lot of conflict between our generations. Older generations are frustrated, younger generations are frustrated, we're losing everyone, and there'll be some poor leader exec in the middle sandwiched. And I'm just going, well, let's interrogate our premise a little bit and what we're assuming is normative.
Yeah, and I guess we've got to be really across trends too, because add into that the concept of things like emoji communication and what might be seen as like passive aggressive thumbs up from younger generations, or
a full stop.
Yes, exactly. Full stops, the acronyms, it's so hard to keep up with. But if we want to engage these generations, especially those coming up, I mean, I've got a Gen Alpha coming up, what will that be like? It's going to be absolutely crazy.
My Gen Alpha, just on the emoji thing, for Book Week, was begging me to let him go as the eggplant emoji. And I was like, he's 9. And I was like, no. And so he's having a straight up meltdown in Spotlight because I'm like, you cannot wear that to Book Week, mate. And he's like, why, Mum? And in the end, I was like, oh, I just told him.
Yeah, well, you got to be
He
honest.
went as a banana. I don't know if that's better.
Clear is kind, as Brene always says. Sandy, how do you adapt your communication style and your leadership style to resonate across so many different generations when it comes to the work that you do?
Well, we embrace the technology, as I said before, but what we do is we We ensure that everybody is communicating with each other. So the use of the old mobile phone, it's everybody's third hand and can't do without it. So we've pulled that into our technology throughout the business. So instead of, you used to always have to have your mobile phone locked away under a cupboard or, not even bring it to work at all. Now we embrace it and we use it within the business. So it's used to WhatsApp and communicate as a team. It's used as part of our releasing rooms, to say that they're ready for sale, all of these things. So instead of saying, oh, you can't use it, because we can't not use it. I don't know about you, but I cannot not use it. I'm using it all the time. So we use it now essentially in the business so that it is at hand. And we just make sure that we're monitoring a little bit of that maybe emoji play or all of those kind of things. I was going to say, I hope everybody here knows what a eggplant means. Of course, yeah.
Ask a man.
But other than that, I don't think we could do without the millennials, and they keep both ends continuous. So with the millennials get in, they get it done, they're helping with the coaching, they're embracing everybody together. We have a very flexible workforce, so we have a lot of travellers, we have the very young and the more mature, but with the youngers, they are, they're here for a lifestyle. So when we're doing our rostering or we're doing our employment, we're looking at who is best for the business at the time, and who we want them to work, and when they're there, do the absolute best job that they can and be focused. And by doing that, they're in the WhatsApp groups, they know what's going on. Even if they're not at work, they can see what's going on in the community at work. And overall, I don't know, we just try to include everybody in that way.
Yeah, and perhaps not be too judgmental, I guess. And we do see people on their phones. I think that's probably that generational concern as well. They always assume the worst, assume we're sort of, slacking off or playing on social media if they're younger generation. So it's basically being curious, but not judgmental, I would imagine.
And that's very true. Even as a manager and even if you're a guest in a property, just because you see somebody on their mobile, actually now doesn't mean that they're on social media or texting their mum or their best friend. They're actually probably working on their mobile. So there's been a whole shift in that dynamic.
It's a really big thing. I think about, the judgment on mothers in playgrounds, for example, when it comes to being on their phone and the assumptions that they're just not concentrating on their kids or whatever it might be. But actually, we're doing the mental load stuff, the Woolworths shop, the school newsletter reads, the subscriptions that
We're definitely not on Instagram at all.
Never.
No TikTok,
not
nothing.
Opening it.
I'm reading.
And I think that's a really important conversation, this concept of trust, because trust is defined differently. Your story about the ABC is a really good illustration of that, Katie. How we build trust definitely differs. So what does the research actually tell us about those differences? What can you share there?
So trust amongst workers globally is at its lowest recorded ebb. So it's around 23-24% trust. And we've got Gen Zs coming in, so 1995 to 2009, give or take, and they've been formed in an era of universally systemic instability, with the cherry on top being the pandemic. And so they've watched the failure of leadership and institutions in real time, and they've been exposed to that at such a young age through the internet and via social media, which is, again, a nightmare because it's their capacity, because their frontal lobe is still forming, so their critical analysis, their deductive capacity, their ability to hold complexity is still developing. And yet they've been bombarded with all of these signals and messaging. And so trust for the Gen Z is their most scarce resource. And so probably the simplest way to explain it would be within the models of works, because if all human behaviour meets a need. We're sense-making creatures. So whatever we're doing, we are looking to meet basic fundamental needs to be seen, say, significant, meaning, mastery, autonomy, whatever you want to call it. And so the way that we, I suppose, cue or respond to those cues or receive those belonging cues or those safety cues is different because it's based on what is formational to you. So for example, older generations, they would be the normative work model would be the industrial model, which is sort of, trust the institution, be a good soldier, earn your place, stay long enough, stay loyal, do your job, hierarchical, bish, bash, bosh, and we'll look after you. But then globalization, automation comes in, swings a wrecking ball through that, and that social contract is broken. So we're sense-making creatures, we're solving the problem. So then we've got sort of more Gen X boomer coded, a new model of work, which is the knowledge worker, which is basically, if I'm the best at this, then I'm safe. You can't get rid of me. There's no machine that can replace me. So that gave rise to this sort of competitive scarcity grind culture. And Gen X grew up in an era of instability compared to their boomer parents, often known as the lucky generation, because you all bought houses when they cost $7.50. And you're talking to me about smashed avocado, all right. But Gen X, the first generation to experience a fundamental change in the family unit, first generation to experience a rapid rate in the rate of parental separation and divorce, the Cold War, and insecurity. And so it translated into a really strong work ethic, tighter social circles, and a kind of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps model. But then when the boomers didn't hand on the baton, come on guys, give it up. And my recognition and all my hard work and my genius and brilliance wasn't recognised, well then, what was that? So that social contract was broken. And then you've got Gen Zs who've come in with the networked adaptive model where they're looking at both of those and going, yeah, no, thank you. I don't want to work 80 hours a week and, and not be able to have a living wage. And I want to build a life, like you referenced, more than I want to build a career. And so they don't want to have to choose. And so they were looking at that going, actually, what they're looking for is this collaborative networked model because trust is so low. They make sense of the world and they find safety in the world through relationships and connectivity, because I can't trust the institution, but I can trust the relationship that I have with you. And so they're naturally collaborative. So when you understand that you've got the institution, then you've got I trust myself with the knowledge workers, and then you've got I trust the relationships and the purpose. So make it make sense to me, which is why for Gen Zs, what you know is really not important at all. It's why it matters. And that's the difference, which is what you've referenced in going, they're distracted, they need change, because that's what their attention span is 3.2 seconds at the minute, which is dropped from 12.8 if you're a boomer. So just stop and think about that for a minute. It's not that they're terrible people, it's just how they've been formed. And so you've got to coach and scaffold for that. You've got to design for inclusion based on accurate information and a baseline read. So to build trust, to bring that to a close, you've got to understand the different systems of meaning that each generation naturally default to alongside, and that's before we've got to gender, that's before we've got to called communities, that's before we've got to any other human reality. And it's about learning how to be human and rehumanizing your systems and designing so that you don't have to choose between being a human being with vital relationships and wellness and being considered a valuable employee who makes money, because it's a false economy to think that it's one or the other.
I think one of the things, and I guess it's my job to speak on behalf of the audience sometimes, is go,
What Katie meant to say was...
No, the research is critical, right? Understanding the why, the foundation is, what drives every other action that we make. But how do you deal with, and this question's not in the script, but how do you deal with overwhelm that happens when, business leaders have to sort of go, right, well, there's so many different areas to consider, generational, and as you said, the intersectional elements haven't even come into it. How do we deal with overwhelm of having to know all the things?
Yeah. So many of the organisations and the executives I work with feel so wedged. They're wedged between the board or the shareholders or their direct line manager and the frontline workers. And that's before we've got to the people they're providing services or goods to. And they sit there, and the amount of times I see these brilliant millennial Gen Z boomers who go, I just don't know how to be good at my job anymore in this environment, because what's written down in their JMP isn't actually what they're having to execute, but what they're actually having to execute isn't rewarded in the system, and it isn't recognised in the system, because basically what they're doing is managing invisible architecture and sort of the unspoken rules of the game. And you can learn a lot from a culture by what it rewards, what it tolerates, and what it celebrates. And so there's what we say, and then there's what we actually do, right? And culture is what happens when the boss walks out the room, right? So yes, I've just forgotten the question, but I remember it being great.
How do we deal with overwhelm? What's something that you
So
would suggest?
I always say it's better to be overwhelmed by the problem than underwhelmed by the problem, because if you're overwhelmed by the problem, it means you're still engaged with it. If you're underwhelmed, it means you're one of the 6 in 10 workers globally who's quite quitting at the moment. And that's only because you're a sense-making creature and you're just like, this just isn't worth my headspace because I can't move this needle. I have not got the autonomy, the power, the agency. No one's going to listen. So I'm just going to mail it in, survive the system, run the gauntlet and hope for the best and just live for the weekend. And so when you're dealing with the overwhelm, you've got to understand that the signal, the symptom, the conflict, the challenge does not equate to a failure of leadership. Because most cultural problems, most issues of conflict, most leadership challenges are actually architectural. They're a system-related thing because we're looking to find meaning, we're looking for safety, and we're looking to make a difference. And that's shared across all the generations. So dealing with the overwhelm starts by actually embracing being overwhelmed because it means you actually care. And then from there, you have to break it down into its component parts. What's actually going on? What am I assuming is going on? And start to interrogate your premise. And like you've referenced, curiosity. And then we're off to the races.
Fantastic. I think that's a really nice little structure, figuring out, doing it one at a time and addressing everything with curiosity. One of the things I love, though, about you, Sandy, is this concept of a young at heart hotel. Now, perhaps if I was a leader and I was looking at how to deal with all of these moving parts, having a mission statement or an overarching theme like being a young at heart hotel would be something that's helpful for me to constantly look at as a North Star. What have you learnt about belonging and, I guess, success as a leader when it comes to a young at heart hotel concept?
I think what I've learned is that everybody wants to have fun. They really want to enjoy what they do, and when they come to work, they want to have a good time. And they want to enjoy the people that they work with and come away feeling satisfied with their day. I mean, we spend a lot of time at work, and I have in the past ruined relationships by talking so much about my work colleagues that they got jealous and run away. You know, you've just got to embrace what we do, like embrace each other as friends. We work together. We need to culturally be aware of each other, what makes everybody tick. And then it doesn't matter what generation they are. Everybody wants fun. And if you come into work and you smile and you have a good time and then you go home and you feel like you've actually done you've completed your role. I mean, fun has to be within a framework, of course. We've got, procedures to follow. We have processes that need to be done, bills that need to be paid. So we need to make sure that we're following a framework. But essentially, to have fun at work is part of that really good time. And, you do want to wake up in the morning and go, hey, yeah, I can't wait to go into Little National today. Like, I want to see Sandy, I want to see Becky, I want to see Dan, I want to see these people because I really enjoy what I do. And I think across generations, if you're engaging at all levels, be it on WhatsApp or face-to-face while you're on the property, that's really important.
Absolutely. And I guess that concept of fun, we lose that as adults, don't we? And coming back to your commentary, Katie, about humanising a workforce, like fun, why can't we have fun? That element of seriousness that we perceive we might need to have to be taken seriously at work. It's not necessarily the case all the time. Now, change, of course, is really constant. We're always changing. We're dealing with evolution of technology, the AI impact that we're all feeling in our businesses. Now, every generation, though, responds to change differently. Katie, what are the common generational blind spots that you think derail transformation in business?
I think fundamentally insecurity is, it's not generational, it's a human thing because so ageism is the most prevalent form of discrimination in the workplace in developed nations today. My uncle is here, he's so very handsome, and we were walking around Lavender Bay the other day and we bumped into a boat builder and we got chatting and he was saying he's in his 50s and that he was finding it incredibly difficult to get work even though he's an incredibly talented, experienced creative director. And because he's over 50, I don't know, he was the good looking, let's say 55, let's be fair. 55, yada, yada, like got a lot of contribution left to give, but the algorithm and the filtering system won't recognize that, which is so wasteful and it's so disrespectful and it's so fundamentally dehumanized because we're going to have people working for longer And so I think it's so important that we, I suppose, build leadership structures that are secure and that scaffold for growth at every age and stage, that you design systems for retention that assume care responsibilities, that assume inclusion across age, across gender, across all the different identifiers, so that you're not going, oh, golly, you know, it's because at the moment we're losing such a valuable, I suppose, knowledge piece and cultural piece if we are becoming sort of homogenized within our cultures. So I think that's a really important one. But in terms of generational blind spots, I think if you are older, you've got to really dig deep and look at where you're insecure and where you feel threatened. And I think if you are sort of middle-aged, I don't really, I'm trying to be so respectful. Me, in your 40s, whatever, you've got to think, what can I learn? Because we've moved from that hierarchical top-down into that more messy Venn diagram, strengths-based leadership, which is actually great because you get better outcomes across the generations faster. And because the world is changing so quickly, you've got less time to onboard and engage people, especially younger generations. So if they can't see a pathway for development, if they can't see, so for Gen Z, you said that they're not, if I had $1 for every time somebody complained to me that Gen Zs are entitled, I would be able to buy waterfront property in Sydney. I don't think they're entitled. I think they're looking to advance quickly because they've grown up in a world of rapid change. And so if they can't see the pathway forward, they're like, well, why would I invest my time here if you're not recognising, you know, well, they're coming from my job. They've been here 3 months. Like, you know, where's the pay rise? Or why am I not the CEO? It's like, oh, gracious me. It's like, all right, mate. You know, but do you remember when you were young? Do you remember that? And you had all the answers. All the answers. It was wild. Sorry, I'm from Adelaide. Answers. You had all the answers. You knew everything, right? But you just need different scaffolding at different ages. And so generational blind spots would be always asking yourself the question, where am I insecure? Where am I actually insecure? How does that play out? What culture of feedback am I permissioning? How are people experiencing me and my leadership and vice versa? And what do I need to grow and scaffold around not just myself, but around my people so that we can get more of what matters? So there's nothing fails like success. Hubris, oh, well, I've got my 10,000 hours. Shut up, young person, go photocopy something. I'll call you when I need you. That's not going to fly.
What's a photocopier?
Exactly. Let me find a meme to explain that for you. So I think it's less about generational blind spots as it is about human blind spots.
And I guess always having that attitude of curiosity that we've mentioned, but also reframing. If you've got somebody in your team that is highly motivated, that is a fantastic opportunity when we're dealing with many, I guess, that are quiet quitting, as you said. So how can we reframe our approach to those sorts of employees, no matter who they are, and try and, I guess, funnel that energy in really positive and meaningful ways?
It's so important. And so 6 out of 10 are quiet quitting, mailing it in. 8 out of 10 could be won over with a few small changes to their work experience, and that will be largely driven by their direct line manager who has more of an impact on your mental health than your spouse or significant other. Just stop and think about that for a minute. And so 74% of workplace productivity and engagement outcomes are driven by how engaged a manager is. So if we think trust is low, about 23%, and we've got only about 31% of people, 31% of people globally who understand what a win is in their workplace. That number drops to 14% if you're below 30. So again, is going, right, what do I need to scaffold? How do I need to build this? But the capacity of a leader or a manager to lead in this cultural moment and translate between the different generations and the different models of work in a rapidly accelerating cultural moment is going to impact 75% of outcomes, which means that this is just the most important work.
Yeah, it's huge. The middle manager, I think it was Gallup that released a report earlier this year and said that they are the ones that are the tipping point, essentially, and they're not getting the leadership training that they need to manage through generations. And sometimes it's as simple as, I guess, reflecting on how people are contributing in the workforce. One of the studies that we do at First Movers is around women's engagement and confidence in the workforce. And a lot of the data that's come out of that is that 40% of them just want to be regularly recognised for their their contribution. It's something so simple, it's free. It's something any of us can actually do, but it's understanding what those drivers and motivators are.
There was a law firm that I worked with, and everyone was just hating their lives, like everyone. And I said for 6 weeks, I wasn't going to do anything, because all I wanted them to do for 6 weeks was to use their manners. I said, I want you to say, please, thank you, and I'm sorry. Those are the only things that I want you to do. And I said, I won't work with you unless you're willing to sign off on that. And I'm going to be asking. And because it's exactly that. And it's just going, hey, what does it look like to be human and to hold that space and to appreciate? Because Gen Xers will often say, oh, you know, these Gen Zs, they want me to be their mum, their dad, their coach, their psychologist, their therapist. Like, you know, it's just like, come to work, do your job, go home. But Gen Zs have different expectations of the workplace, and it fills relational needs that older generations were found in sort of community groups, you know, Rotary, church, sporting clubs, and those that engagement has changed over time. And so Gen Zs look to the workplace to meet fundamental relational needs. And older generations who've got established relationships outside of work, and probably kids and less bandwidth, are just like, just freaking come, do your job and jog on. And they're like, what is this madness? And I'm going, well, actually you want the same things. You're just meeting those needs differently based on how you've been formed. And once you've understood that, then, you know,
Jog on.
jog on it, let's go.
Sandy, now you've taken, you know, the hotels through rebrands, through openings. How do you keep your people motivated? People of all ages and stages, as we know.
Primarily through inclusion and relevance. So inclusion included in any product, you know, projects that are going on, and delegation, getting them motivated into what they're going to do for their future. So where's this, where are we headed? What's happening with this business? Because particularly if you're doing a property a takeover or a rebranding, then there's a lot of change going on and everybody gets a little bit nervous. So it's about making sure that they feel comfortable with what's happening. So communication again is another thing. I just wanted to go back quickly to something that you talked about, wellness. So wellness is a huge thing, I think, across businesses, and we have a structure for it, and it's probably a sad thing to say that we have a structure for it. But the reason we have a structure is because every day is a whirlwind. And in the office, you get caught up, and before you know it, it's time to go home, and it's probably way past time to go home. So we have with our business a wellness calendar, which we need to, you know, we need to participate in. And that gets the whole team on board, and you're celebrating, and you're all together celebrating a particular religion or you know, wellness for mental health, all these different things. So that we're all focusing on it together, so that way it doesn't get left by the wayside. So everybody's included, and we make sure that it's being addressed, because otherwise, you know, the day-to-day is so busy and it's going on. And so I think that helps getting everybody involved, particularly across our workspace. Celebrations. Celebrating the wins definitely gets everybody included. Everybody likes to have fun.
How do you celebrate?
Oh, we have champagne. We have notice boards, pin boards of who's done well this month. We have leaders who are very participative in that and recognising their team very well. So I'm very lucky to have really good millennial leaders, I guess, and they're the ones that are embracing the next generation and making sure that they're recognised. Reward and recognition is huge. Everybody wants to come to work and get that pat in the back and be recognised.
And a salary is not reward and recognition.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Not to the younger generations as well. That's been really well documented. And I love that you've mentioned how you celebrate. And I think one of the things I'm hearing from you is the diversity in the way that you celebrate. It's not just like International Women's Day and Are You OK days, the really sort of high level, well-known awareness days. We're looking at Diwali Day, for example, and Pride, and making sure that all people of all ages and stages, but intersectional sort of elements as well, are being recognised. And I'm reflecting back to one of the other lessons from leaders we had with Milo Wilkinson, and she talked about the fact that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And when you think about that, it's so true, isn't it? To fit in means that you actually don't belong. It's a square peg in a round hole. And I think, you know, those sorts of moments, they may be small, but if they're regular and consistent and diverse, those are really important pieces of the puzzle. Katie, I want to go back to you because a lot of people will probably be thinking, yeah, this is great. I really love the idea of humanizing workplaces and leaderships, but I've got KPIs and metrics I need to hit. So how do we translate this knowledge into tangible performance outcomes for businesses?
Yeah, so this is about establishing fair play. What are the rules of the game? How do we know we win at Westpac? How do we know we win at First Movers? How do we know we win at the hotel? How do we know? And is everyone playing by the same rules? So is there an invisible set of rules or an invisible architecture that we actually need to surface so that we can sort of learn and understand what people are actually experiencing versus what we assume they're experiencing within a system? So again, comments like, oh, we're a family here. I'm like, oh, okay. Does that mean everyone gets equal share of the inheritance, mate? Because I don't think your profit share is set up like
and
that.
Does that make people feel uncomfortable? Because I much like generations, we have younger ones that want to be all inclusive, but others that like that sort of boundary and barrier that makes them feel safe.
It's the difference between bring your whole self to work and, I'm a professional, like I'm not your friend, like I'm not. And that's okay too. It's just about understanding what need that's meeting and not being a douche. Really about that, just being kind and being curious and being willing to learn. And so turning it into tangible performance outcomes has to start with having a baseline that everyone is clear on. This is how you know. So if only around 30% of the workforce is confident, would strongly agree that they know what a win looks like. If I'm going to hit a home run today, how will I know that's happened? And what will signal that? And then what will happen next? Okay, because otherwise we're playing fair, unfair, and it's exhausting because, especially for women, because, you're trying to win at all these different things and you just don't know how because the system isn't designed to do that, right? And so fair play and then constantly being curious is about that. So they'll say change happens over the course of a lifetime, but things will turn around in an instant because this is ongoing work. It's not the thing that you tick the box, oh, we've done that, now we'll unlock performance. This is an ongoing needing to be embedded into your system and into your way of thinking that is actually economically stupid per your KPIs, not to invest in this work. Because if you can unlock higher performance by driving psychological safety, designing for inclusion, care, for growth and scaffolding across all ages so that people feel secure and safe and valued, no matter whether they're 55 or 25, that's going to get you more of what you want, which ultimately will be the rising tide, which lifts your profit margin, which lifts your productivity, which helps you be an employer of choice and attraction, retention, recruit, all those sorts of things across all the generations. And so, but if you can't surface the baseline data accurately and then establish fair rules of the game that are then clearly communicated and constantly reinforced, then it's going to be very, very hard to turn that into KPIs. And so I would always talk about understanding success as a KPI. Can the person who's on admin up to the board chair, are they going to give me the same answer?
And I wonder, and this is probably a question for both of you, but when we're creating these policies and processes within our workplaces and we're addressing what those KPIs are going to be, how well are we including multiple generations in that decision making? Because I know one of the I guess some of the research that's come out recently as well is that we're often expecting people to just participate in the execution, not actually the strategy around this. So it's a question for everyone. How are we including diverse voices in that decision-making process to come up with what that target should actually be? Sandy, what do you think? Is that something that you think about when it comes to the work that you do?
I think that we don't do it enough. I think that, you're right. We set KPIs based on what's our revenue going to be, what's our results going to be, what's our where are we sitting on our pillars? But overall, we're not so much sitting with the team and saying, hey, what do you want to achieve this year? What's your goal? I do ask the question. I usually put the top four at least, and then try to ask, what would you like to achieve for this year? But we've got to remember that when you're coming to KPIs, it's got to be measurable. It's got to be, where do we start at? Where did you finish at? And it's got to be, you've got to be accountable for it. So some may not have that right direction. So it's very important that we, do try, but I think we need to try harder.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's also just in the consultation and also the visibility of how that contribution is then translated to the wider workforce. What's the value of me saying to you, honestly, this is what I think, if I'm, going to share that with you and then nothing seems to come of it? So how important is visibility perhaps for younger generations when it comes to this sort of concept?
I think that Gen Z have grown up only ever having a voice. They've only ever known a world where they can broadcast and engage and tweet and have multiple digital personas whereby they don't, the digital and the physical is seamlessly integrated, right? And so if you've only ever known a voice and you've only ever been able to contribute and collaborate, and they're so entrepreneurial and they're so altruistic, they're wild, they're my favourite, don't tell the others. And but like they then come to an organisation that'll be largely Gen X coded, let's say for argument's sake, and they're told that they don't know anything because they're 22 and a graduate. And no, you got to. We all had to earn our dues, and we had to do this. I literally, when I was a cadet journalist, was told to sit down, shut up, and wait to photocopy something.
Same in the police force.
How fun, right? And I bet that made us go, do you know what? I'm really wanting to stick around here. This feels like a fun place. But we didn't have the option not to sign that social contract because we didn't have the option. And the difference for emerging generations is that they have rich opportunity. And so they've hung out at the top of Maslow's for a really long time. And so if they've got options. They don't want to work here, that's fine. I'll start my own business. I'll go over here, gig economy, whatever. No, because this has to make sense. So I think coherence is the goal across all the generations, but it has to make sense where your systems of meaning, where your systems of reward, where your capacity to contribute your best. And we go to work to play, don't we, to contribute what we uniquely bring. And it matters to us that that is positive and that we do not just work, but we do good work, and that good work is recognised within a human system. Because when that happens, our brain gets all super happy and suddenly all of our amygdala just chills out, which means that we're more creative and we can engage and our relationships go deeper and we're not suddenly kind of in this dominance, extractive, zero-sum, scarcity mindset, corporate ladder BS, which actually has the opposite intended effect because I don't have to choose between being a generative human and a performing worker.
I think what we were talking about there is a generation where they have options, right? So we can't, it's not a control, it's a connection piece that we really need to be successful at when it comes to workplaces. So Sandy, I wanted to ask you, how do you balance empathy with a generation that does have these options and feels that they can go anywhere and that they are here by choice, and many of them would be, but also balancing that with accountability? How do you sort of navigate that dynamic?
I think it's very important to be empathic with everybody. Understand everybody's got a different home lifestyle, they've got different career choice or future direction that they want to go in. But I think it's also very important to not get too close, I guess I would say. So we're empathetic, we're making sure that we're involved in knowing what their lifestyle is, what direction they want, what days off they need, when they want to pick up the kids, what, all of these different solutions. And particularly with the new generation is, they want lifestyle versus necessarily work style. So we need to not be too close to their personal life, I guess was what I would say. Is it empathetic to what they're looking for, what direction they're going, how they're emotionally feeling, without getting too close. Don't get involved in what's their boyfriend, who's their girlfriend, who's, what is going on too close. We need to be able to stand back. Otherwise, we can't be accountable, and we can't hold them accountable. So it is very important to have a little bit of an edge, be on the fringe, be involved, know that they've got a boyfriend or girlfriend, or that they've got, aspirations to go to Spain or to go wherever, but not to be so closely involved that you're part of their inner life. And it's important to be able to have that little bit of a gap. Otherwise you can't. It's very difficult to hold someone accountable if you're too involved with their world. And also you get so absorbed into their world that you're forgetting about, not necessarily got your attention on the rest of the team. That sometimes somebody who is very, very empathetic, taking so much of your energy, actually the rest of the team loses. So it's very important to not get as I said, too involved and just to sit on the edge, but be managing the person.
Yeah. The word that comes to mind when I'm hearing you talk is balance, right? Because we know that generations and people, humans in the workplace, really value someone that shows that they care. And that might be knowing their boyfriend or girlfriend's name, or knowing that they've got a goal for a trip to go overseas, but keeping it kind of top level, I guess, and not getting in too deep, always sort of focusing on that idea of balance. If each generation could give one piece of advice to another. So why don't we pick, for example, millennials and Gen X? Are they too close? Gen Y? Just pick two. What would be that piece of advice?
As in, we're giving it?
Yeah, so you're giving it to a younger generation.
So me as a, yes, millennials.
Millennials.
We're the real millennials. Everyone thinks that a millennial is anyone younger than they are. But like, we're in our 40s.
We still think we're young. What are you talking about?
No, it's great. So what advice would I give as a millennial to
A younger generation.
and you're
in
a
the
Gen
workforce.
X, presumably? And what advice would you give?
Oh, I would say listen and learn. Oh, no, not necessarily. Just be respectful of each other and listen. Yeah, listen, learn, ask questions, get involved.
I would say failure is your friend. That's what I'd say. I'd say normalize failure and plan for it, systematize it, and embed that into your culture, because if we're not failing, it means we're not trying, and it means we're scared. And so I think that particularly for emerging generations, particularly for females, fear of failure is the paralysis that comes from that, because you're not going to just fail and fall over and dust yourself off. It's going to be litigated on social media, and your friends are going to have something to say about it, and it's going to exist on the internet forever. So I would say normalize failure and actively cultivate offline, in real life.
IRL relationships.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say IRL? Is that just
Well,
a
I feel like we've just
millennial
aged
way of
ourselves with
describing
that.
it?
You know, it's like tell me you're a millennial without telling me you're enough.
Exactly.
IRL. But I think like, so I used to have an internship program that I would run, and so I would have sort of 10 guys that we'd do life with really intensely over the course of a year to grow them as leaders and as humans. So they're in my home, which is super inconvenient because I'm mad at my husband and my kids are feral, and you know, no one's flushed the toilet, and it's just like, oh, come on guys, lock in. But I want them to see the mess, and that I don't have the answers, and that I do screw up, and that that's actually the most normal thing, because I think sometimes leaders, we think we need to be the silver bullet and we need to have all the answers, but like in what world? Like in what world are we not better when we have the mutual interdependence? So yes, I would say failure is a friend, failure is a friend. And then so what we would do is every time we do lunch, phones are away. They weren't just off, they were literally in another room. And so we just normalised that across generations. And so everyone had to spend 5 minutes at the beginning of their day talking to somebody from a different generation. And we just normalised it because we've got to socialise the poppies, you know?
Yeah. It's absolutely true though. Making sure our offline relationships are always stronger than our online ones is one of the biggest keys to well-being, safety, success in life. What I'm hearing though, if I could sum it up in one word, is humanising. You know, how can we think humans first, not systems first? How can we be hearts and mind focused around the people that we deal with, rather than thinking about them in generations, think of them as humans, of people with needs, basically. An incredible conversation. I think we could do easily another hour here, but people do need to probably get off to work. One more thank you to our wonderful partners in Nespresso Professional. Please do see the team after today. Let's give them one more round of applause. What an incredible conversation with Katie Iles and Sandra Bellamy today. We discussed working with boomers to Zoomers, and there were so many great takeaways and insights for you to deliver back to your teams to help each of us listen, learn, and lead with empathy across every single generation. Don't forget to explore the other conversations in our Lessons from Leaders series, all brewed with Nespresso Professional. Until next time, I'm your host, Yasmin London. Please take good care.